Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here on Tuesday, June 10th, 2014 at 1500 in the afternoon Eastern Daylight Time. Now, in contrast to yesterday's very down Joe, well, I'm still not a particularly upbeat Joe today, but I'm considerably better than I was yesterday. This has been a fairly interesting day from the standpoint of just things happening. Well, not necessarily good things happening, but things happening. Now, Paul's home today and he's home tomorrow. And tomorrow his plans to go up and get his driver's license renewed and his license plates renewed. And my plan of attack is to go up at 7:45 and get an oil change and lube on my truck. So we've got things to tie us up a little bit tomorrow morning anyway. But today, Paul went down to do his laundry on our washing machine, which I still sort of call the new washing machine since we got it in August of 2013, which means it's still under warranty. So it seems that it ran through, the sensing cycle and the wash cycle, and then it just sort of became becalmed. Excuse me, it would not go on to rinse. It would, well, now see, this machine has long pauses between cycles. It likes to sort of think and collect and sense, and it makes strange noises and so forth. So you have to sort of accept that there's going to be a certain amount of that, but not one of these 5 or 10 minute intervals where you get like a bzzz and then silence, and maybe like a and then silence, and then bzzz and then silence, and then nothing. So he told me about this, and I went down and checked it out, and then I thought, well, you got to go back and consult the manual on this one again. So went got the manual, and and then you have to sort of, like I thought, well, let's just sort of restart the thing, Well, that didn't seem to do any good. Well, let's just treat it like a computer and turn everything off and unplug it and go away for a while and come back and see what happens if you try to start it from the get-go again, anew. No. Well, let's take all the clothes out and then wait a while and then load them back in and then try to start it again, do it again, and, it sort of went, and then, it. Now it did occasionally try to start filling and then cut off. Well, so now we've got some really, really wet clothes sitting in there in a tub that's got maybe about this much water, in the bottom. Well, so my goal was, well, either let's get the thing pumped out so we can get these things in the dryer without having to wring them out or do a bunch of stuff. Well, more similar horsing resulted in the following findings. Not revelations, findings. Apparently, you can cajole the pump to work to pump the water out. Got to do that. Apparently, you can get the thing to actually fill up. Got to do that. Got to pump the water out again. All right. But when it comes time to have the motor move that thing around, zipper. You know, tried it on the wash cycle, tried it on the rinse and spin cycle, tried it on the spin and just the spin and dry only cycle. Nothing. And just silence, and then silence, and then silence, like nothing. So it's time to go to Sears.com and, you know, schedule a service appointment. At least we were able to get the water pumped out so he can put his clothes in the dryer. Well, apparently, rather than just scheduling a service appointment, you know, Sears.com wants you to chat online with somebody, which actually didn't go all that badly. So, sometime between 1 and 5 on Thursday afternoon, this guy's supposed to show up and try to fix this machine. It's still under warranty. Now, unlike Ford and a lot of other products I've owned, you know, they didn't manage to let it go like a year and 5 days before it died. You know, see, if they'd let it go a year and 5 days before it died, then it wouldn't be under warranty. And I'd pay for all this stuff. But this is still under warranty, so I should get this one free and clear. You know, assuming they fix it. Hell, I don't know, they'll give me a new machine. I don't know. Well, it's the motor's dead. It's an, you know, it's an induction, you know, the induction coil's humming, the motor's dead for whatever reason. That's what it is. No, so be it. We'll find out. So that was my day brightener. So then, well, you know, it's, you know, things happen. That's, you deal with it. So then I decided, well, I need to clean out this hard drive, you know, because I have, you know, I only had like 40 gigabytes left out of 500 gigabytes. You know, plus my CPU's sort of seized up and crashed here 4 times in the last 3 weeks. And I thought, well, if I can clean out some of this stuff, maybe, you know, it won't do that as much, you know. And so I did that. Now, you know, it works fairly easily, but, you know, so I transferred out 95 gigabytes worth of these movies, you know, my videos and some things I had downloaded from the internet. And given that I started out with like 50 gigabytes free on the hard drive, that's what the little Apple thing says up here in the corner. I thought, well, I'm going to have 140 gigabytes of free space left on this hard drive when I get done. No, it still says there's only 50 gigabytes, you know, so I don't know. Obviously, the stuff's gone out of the hard drive because when I look at my hard drive, it's not there. When I look at the plug-in external drive, it's there. You know, it's not like it copied off and it's still in my hard drive. It's over there. It's out of my hard drive. So I don't know how they call, you know, free space on the hard drive. You know, maybe anything that needs to be overwritten isn't counted as free space. I mean, I don't know. If anybody can clear that up for me, that would be wonderful. Because I'm completely illiterate in these matters, and I can't. You know, I've got a couple of books about this stuff that I look at, and I honestly can't figure it out. I'm not a stupid man, but I have no facility in this area. I soldier on, I slog at it, I try. You know, blind pigs find acorns occasionally. So, today's story, continuing the trilogy of Joe's Cavalcade of Stool, and this will be the last one about this sort of stuff. I promise y'all. It actually involves 2 patients, and I'm going to try to make this brief, but you know, there's a good chance I won't be able to. when I was a medical student, was I a medical student? Or no, I was a medical student on pediatrics out at Children's Hospital here in Columbus. And I was on the infectious disease service, one of the 2 months. You know, 1 month it was like a general medicine pediatrics thing, and then the second month I was on the infectious disease service. And it was on the 6th floor of the old building. I don't know if that building's even still there now, but the cry of the beer being but it was an isolation unit. You know, they had the doors, you know, and all the rooms were isolation rooms. And depending on what the guy or the patient had, and you'd either have to put on all this stuff or not. And we had a 16-year-old guy in there who had disseminated histoplasmosis. Now, histoplasmosis is a very common fungal infection in pretty much the eastern half of the United States. Anyway, particularly the northeastern half of the United States, or northeastern quadrant of the United States. And it's a fungal infection, and it's spread by bird feces. And it was very, in the days when there were a lot of farms, it was extremely common. Because the chickens would have it, and you'd go into the chicken coops, and you'd be breathing, the dust off the chicken shit, and you'd get this stuff in your lungs, and you'd get histoplasmosis. Now, histoplasmosis generally, is a very self-limited problem. It gets in your lungs, it gets filtered out into the lymph nodes, and it gets walled off, and that's it. No problem. It's kind of like TB that way. I mean, TB is, relatively, well, it's contagious if you're really close to somebody with it, and if you get a face full of it a few times. But generally, you'll wall it off. You'll have it, you'll wall it off, and that lives happily along in your lymph nodes and your mediastinum, and then short of you getting some sort of serious immunologic depression, that's it. You always test positive for TB, but you don't have it. You can't spread it. Same with histo. But very, very occasionally, as with TB, you get this stuff will disseminate throughout the body, and then you're very ill indeed. And this 16-year-old guy from Southern Ohio came up, and he had disseminated histo, and he had been in the hospital at the time I encountered this guy, this young man actually. He had been in there around 4 or 5 months. Wow. Well, at that time, there were very few drugs to treat systemic fungal infections. Now, there are a couple, 3 more now, and I can't speak to those. But at that time, the mainstay was a drug called amphotericin B. Excuse me. And amphotericin B was a fairly effective drug. You had to administer it intravenously. It wasn't tablets, and it was I think it was either twice a day or 3 times a day drug intravenously, and it was effective. You're talking about a 6-8 week course of therapy, but it would eventually clear this stuff out, and for the most, in 90-some% of the people. But it had some side effects. First of all, it caused massive, well, the main side effect was it caused massive potassium wasting. I mean, you had to supplement the potassium that these people, they couldn't, you had to give them extra IV potassium because they could not dietarily keep up with the potassium loss that this drug caused. And As I recall, this guy's potassium was down around 1.6. Well, first of all, that's getting close to near fatal levels. You know, your normal potassium runs anywhere between 3.5 and 5.2 milliequivalents per liter. Well, this guy was 1.6. And, you know, try as we might, I mean, we were giving this guy like, you know, 120 milliequivalents of potassium per liter of IV fluid. The supplement, you know, you can't give that stuff too fast, because if you give it too fast, you're going to stop the guy's heart, you know. So, and that's all IV executions, isn't it? So, yeah, this was a real problem. So one of the side effects of very low potassium, other than cardiac rhythm problems, is that essentially with a very low, you can't, your bowels won't work. I mean, you can't propel anything through your gut. And so this guy had fecal impaction after fecal impaction after fecal impaction. And so my job as the lowest man on the totem pole, I'm sorry, individual on the totem pole, because we actually had a couple of young women on, you know, medical students, my colleagues, who were great. I mean, these were great women, I'll tell you, you know, I mean, you know, they'd get in there and just, you know, I mean, hell, they'd have cheerfully dug this guy out too. But it fell to me to dig this guy out. So you really can't do that with a finger, particularly when you got short fingers, you know, like I have. So what you do is you get a spoon and you grease it up, and you go up there and you sort of, you know, it's sort of like putting the iron spoons on for a forceps delivery. You sort of slide this spoon up along the rectal wall, dig out a chunk, and then you wait a while. Mash around on his belly. Get some more to slide down. Then you slide the spoon up there. Slide that spoon up there. You know, get another chunk out. And I had to do that pretty much every day for a month. He didn't really like to chat while we were doing that, so I didn't get to know him all that well. But, you know, eventually this guy, you know, got cured and went home. God bless him. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to Amphotericin B, too. And good care. Good care. I mean, you know, Children's Hospital is a good hospital. It was then, it is now. And I've got one more little story to tell you, and that's going to be it. Now, when I was a resident, this was when I was a surgery resident, my first year out of medical school. We were on, you know, there were 12 of us. There were 12 interns, and you'd cover for each other at night and that sort of thing, and sometimes on weekends, you know, so you know, pay no attention to that awful phone. So anyway, you know, you'd cover for each other, and I won't use this guy's name because I would assume he's still alive and out there practicing somewhere. I think perhaps the word practicing might have sort of several meanings in his sense, given his general level of skills and attitude, as was demonstrated, you know, well, let's not speak ill of somebody who can't defend themselves. What I can do is I can relate to you what happened. So this guy was, well, first of all, this is another one of these fecal impaction stories, but this involves like a 77-year-old guy. And, and elderly people, regardless of their underlying health, even if they're relatively healthy, sometimes, have problems having bowel movements. And, in the hospital, if particularly if you're sick and have prolonged, you're just in bed and all, they particularly have bowel problems. And you can give them all the little nostrums in the world to try to get them to have a bowel movement and this, that, and the other. And sometimes it just doesn't work. Well, it didn't work in this guy. So it fell to me again as the lowest guy on the... No, I couldn't slough this task off onto the medical students because they, quite honestly, they really wouldn't, even though I would, I love to talk medical students through procedures. This guy was kind of a fragile guy. I didn't want, you really only wanted to get one crack at this guy. Well, no pun intended, in terms of digging him out. And so I was digging him out. Actually, this guy you could pretty much dig out with your finger. I don't know if I think I did use the spoon technique a couple times on him. Well, nonetheless, I was not there one day. Well, I was there. You're there every day, but I wasn't there when this particular clean out happened because my colleague was covering for me on my weekend off is a misnomer. My half day off that week, and so he goes in to dig this guy out, and now he had considerably, he wasn't a particularly big guy. He had much bigger, longer fingers than I did. Well, pretty much everybody in the world does. And so he went in there and he dug away and dug away and dug away. And this guy went at things hammer and tongs. He was like a bull in a china shop. There was nothing subtle about this way this guy treated people. And this isn't necessarily this guy's fault, because this is not an unheard of problem I'm going to tell you about. He's digging away on this guy. This guy goes into septic shock. This guy goes into septic shock. I mean, that does happen from time to time when you horse around in some guy's rectum with a bunch of solid, hard, rock-hard stool. I mean, you can get basically every time you stick something up your behind, you're going to get little micro tears anyway. And the normal immune system can handle it, but if somebody's been in the hospital and is sort of compromised, and so this guy went into septic shock, and he arrested and died. He arrested and died having his fecal impaction dug out. Well, I'm glad it didn't happen to me, because it really actually could have easily happened with me doing it, although I very arrogantly like to think perhaps it would not have done, but you never know. But it was, bad outcomes and bad luck followed this guy around like a cloud his entire time at Ohio State. He even married a female pediatric resident and eventually moved out to Arizona. And I'm going to tell you, if you talk about, Arizona needs a lot of rain and clouds, I guess, from time to time. But, when this guy moved down there, I tell you, there were a number of clouds that moved down there with him, following him around. That's all I can say. Well, so, well, it was one less thing I had to do the next day, I guess, wasn't it? When I came back. Well, that concludes Joe's Cavalcade trilogy, trilogy of the Cavalcade of Stool here. So I'm going to say bye-bye YouTubers on this little series and sequence. All right.